Welcome everyone. Today we're going to look at the patch 13.19 notes. This is going to be the world's official patch. So understandably what we're going to see here is the final combination of the season and what we can expect for worlds. And at the end of the video I'll show you a little bit of a not so much of a tier list, is more of an understanding of what champions will be actively played and that won the most with the changes in these last few patches. And so what will be most likely focused and prioritized then when we get into competitive. I will devolve I will kind of I will explain a bit more in detail once we get to it. But for now, let's just run through the patch notes, see what they did to the game. I don't think these patch notes were very prominent. They didn't change a lot of things. It was mainly just some tweaks because they don't want to shake up the meta too badly. But I do think the meta is still gonna have quite a lot of shakeups, even if the buffs and nerfs don't really change it. Eventually these some champions will get more recognized of for how strong they really are. Okay, for Stardust, a 0 Q cooldown increase. So they increase it early game by 2 seconds and then decrease it those 2 seconds by 0.5 on each rank. So at level 5 it's the same rank, is the same cooldown as it was before. This is a decent change, but it's not going to feel like particularly meaningful. I think we're going to see it at Worlds. It's not going to be any different than it is right now. Most players probably won't even notice it. It is less damage and less push power. It's a bigger window to punish him after EQs, but I don't think it's meaningful enough to a point where a lot of people where it will be felt. Briar, they did some changes to Briar. Most of them were quality of base and some were to her healing and sustainability. But overall, I don't think Briar lost a lot of what made her really strong. And to be honest, I think the quality of life changes to make her kit more to have more visual identifiers of what's going on, I think makes it so it's a lot better to play her effectively. And I think her early game power at level 1 also got, a little bit of a buff. I think she'll do as fine as she was doing before. I don't think this will damage her win rate whatsoever. I think the biggest thing that these patches hit her with was the slowdown there. This short minimum cooldown that they give to her W makes it so she can't W twice in a fight, which was being a bit of a problem. So I feel like having this will be enough to actively put her in the correct position. I'd say she's still like A tier between top and jungle. She's like extremely good if you're proficient with her, but I don't think she will like define metas to come. But she is extremely good. Galio, 20 seconds shaved off of each point in ultimate is really good. Galio is a champion that wants to make plays and be somewhat aggressive as a counter to mid mages to make pressure on the other side of the map, especially in competitive. It's really good. I do expect to see it a bit at Worlds. Not much, but I think given the aggression that is being pushed into the game, I think Galio might be a champion to look out for, especially for Korean and Chinese teams. They're much more prone to using Galio to do very early dives on bot lane. So things like Camille Galio should be back, Jordan Galio. So hopefully we'll see how that goes. In terms of solo queue, I don't think this will make much of a difference to him. It's a lot harder to coordinate and properly, so this might not be something that you feel unless you're like playing Flex or Clash. Gangplank R cooldown decreased. 10 seconds is a bit, but it's not nothing major. The buffs to his upgrades are pretty good, but sadly, it will help him, and I think he's extremely good right now in terms of what he can do into the game. But the meta is so accelerated that it is, and the top lane meta is also very aggressive. So unless you're a really good GP, these buffs won't get really felt. But GP is one of the best champions. If you like, you can play him and you have like genuinely good practice on him, you're gonna be a menace. But and you're gonna be a menace. He's not very different from what he was before this patch, but he was already pretty good, and this just kind of solidifies him a bit. I don't think we're gonna see him at Worlds. A lot of people don't really play him. Maybe some specialists will probably pull him out, but very uncertain. Jhin ultimate damage got increased. His base damage got increased by quite a significant amount, up to 44, which is really good actually. Jhin is one of the bigger winners of the patch, because although this not doesn't seem like much, the new build that came out for him, focusing more on lethality, is actually doing quite a decent work. You can actually get up to 2 ultimates per fight, more towards the towards the mid game, and the execution damage is really big. So if you're planning on picking up Jhin, I'd suggest Duskblade, Axiom Arc, and Collector. You should do pretty good with these 3 items, and just ult at the beginning of the fight, and then get 1 or 2 kills, and then ult again. The control he now has and the dominance in lane is very prevalent. Okay, so LeBlanc nerfs. This is a attempt to hurt the insanely pushing LeBlanc. This was the build I made a video about recently. It was the Static Shiv Trinity Force Hullbreaker build. So their main idea is to try and get her away from those builds and back into AP. I think they've succeeded in doing it. I think she's still going to be hurt in her AP builds in the early game, but mid to late she will feel a lot stronger if they just do natural AP. People might take a bit to shift towards that tendency, but when they do, it might be a force to be reckoned with. It just depends on how long it takes people to go back to normal LeBlanc. Okay, of course, a patch for Worlds, so you need to have a Lee Sin buff, so he kind of gets played at Worlds. His W is an insane buff. You might think that at the end it actually is a nerf, but the idea of his W was that you put points in it second. So for at least a grand majority of your levels, like up to level 11 to 13, like you are with a massive buff to your W. The lifesteal and spell vamp on hits is huge for survivability and fighting prowess. But I guess in compensation, his damage on E was nerfed, although again you won't feel it until later on in the game. E is usually the last thing you max on Lee Sin. So although technically it is a nerf, you don't really feel it. And especially because Lee Sin is a champion that wants to play games quickly and wants to snowball really fast, this ends up being a really, really big buff for him. With the caveat, if he doesn't get ahead, he's just going to be more useless. It's, it's a bit of a give and take. I think for Worlds, it kind of will incentivize some teams to go just pick Lee Sin and try and get the game going. But I don't expect it to do too well. I'm in solo queue. You might run a Havoc. You might start climbing up the tier lists. But I'd imagine it'd be post Worlds or like mid Worlds. He will be played a lot right now in solo queue for sure. He's always a fan favorite champion, but he in effect is better, but at the early game where he was already pretty dominant. So it might become if ends up being too good for him, it might become an issue that we had in season 6 and 7, where it was about what champions counter Lee Sin's early game. So hopefully it doesn't go that far, but these are pretty sustainable buffs. Lissandra's root duration got increased by 1/15 of a second. It's gonna be interesting for mid matchups at Worlds. LeBlanc's gonna fall off the face of the earth. Akali as well isn't really seeing a lot of play. So I don't know what she can really counter. Maybe some top engaged champions, but it'll be interesting to see if she gets some play. In other ideas, though, this does make her a bit more sustainable as a support. So maybe we will see her at Worlds as a support a little bit more consistently from G2, for example. Okay, EAP ratio increased on Nunu. This makes him a lot more consistent. I think this is a really huge buff for AP Nunu. I think Nunu mains who usually run AP will love this buff. I think it makes Nunu AP a lot more what's it called? Reliable. Because usually you had to hit the snowball, you run people down, but the E didn't really do as much damage as you'd like. It was kind of lackluster. I think this will give it a much bigger oomph to the power level of it. Pyke, health growth has been increased, that's good. And the cooldown on his W has been decreased. That's interesting. I think this will be an interesting buff. I know recently there's been a surgence of Taric Pyke bot lanes as a kill combo. That could be an interesting thing to see at Worlds. I don't think anyone will do it. I imagine that most of these changes won't really affect Pyke's pick rate or win rate. It'll feel nice to the Pyke player, but it effectively doesn't really change a lot of how he plays. And being invisible at these later stages of the game is neat, but not fundamental. Maybe for Pyke mid that would work a bit better, but again, that idea in and of itself is already not that good, especially now, so I don't think this will do as much to him as I think Riot was hoping. Okay, so Rek'Sai. My girl sadly got shafted. Although it seems like they've done some things to improve her kit, mainly it was just a very big nerf. The health being reduced hurts a ton for Rek'Sai. In between these levels it feels better. It does even between these levels it doesn't feel really better because the maximum health at that point is so little that the base was what you were actively looking for. The Q damage decrease at the early stages really hurts because that's the pressure point that she wants to take advantage of the most. The movement speed to walk through the jungle being lowered also hurts a ton, especially because it's so low now that at level 11 you get what you got at level 1 before. And that's really painful for her. Although Unburrow now deals a solid more damage, it's very meaningless damage. W is the last ability you max on Rek'Sai, so you only get this at you only start putting points on this at level 14. So until then, you never got a buff. You only got nerfs, and then from 14 to 18, you apparently got a little buff of 40 damage. 80. It's genuinely meaningless, sadly. So yeah, Rek'Sai was one of the strongest nerfs, and we'll for sure not see her at Worlds. Not even thinking about her. She will also start getting hit a ton in solo queue. She'll still do relatively okay. She always kind of does relatively okay in solo queue because her kit is so early game focused and you can catch people off guard very easily and snowball the game very hard. But in effect, if you slow down the pace of the game, Rek'Sai is gonna get. Rek'Sai has been completely gutted. Renekton, base magic resist has gone down a bit. I guess this is also in attendance, in accordance to what they want to do in Worlds, from the buff of Rumble a few patches back and the buff on Cannon recently. I feel like this is a natural progression of like, okay, Renekton is going to be a lot played at Worlds. We want Cannon and Rumble usually to be played as well, so this is an easy nerf to give, to have a opening to kind of say, hey, you can pick magic champions into Renekton and kind of win more easily now. I don't think in solo queue is going to be very hit, and I'd be surprised if people in at Worlds stop picking him. They might be a bit more cautious to just blind pick it so he doesn't get, faced against Cannon. But we'll have to wait and see. Syndra Q damage increased is pretty neat. I don't think it saves her, but it is pretty neat and it will give her a bit more pressure in lane. R's Twitches are got a missile speed increase. Will feel nice. I think maybe now people will stop being able to dodge his ultimate just off movement speed alone, but we'll have to see how much that influences it. And Zeri's movement speed got decreased to be more punishable. Also, fairly decent nerf. I don't think it will do too much on Zeri, and I think with the new builds that are coming out, she won't feel it too hard, but it is a decent start. Okay, so this is one of the bigger changes in this patch. So Random Zoman got a 300 gold decrease. Now, this might seem very right? No one really bought the item. It's just 300 gold. What's the big deal? So, for tank players, a lot of issues recently arose in the sense of like, when you wanted to build armor, you always had kind of a shitty path to go. You either went Frozen Heart to stop as much damage as you possibly could using a low tier gold efficient item that gave you no HP, or you had to use more gold to get some HP, but you didn't get a good enough passive to be really worth that gold. With this change, it makes it so tanks now have a genuinely viable options against crit enemy champions that is on par with Frozen Heart. So a lot of champions that usually build, a lot of tanks will now build Random Zoman a lot more easily, and given the prevalence and dominance of AD carries right now, this could be a really central point, focal point item for a lot of champions to just be able to deny damage from AD carries. Now, builds are already being developed by AD carry players to counteract this, and I'll give them to you guys at the end of the video because I want you guys to also use them, because it's a good build and I think you guys should, take advantage of it while you can. But it is notable that this change might shake up the meta both in jungle and top lane. Not to a very big degree, but to a decent amount of degree, in the sense of like, Ornn now is a much better item to do against Ornn, Sho'gaf, and Sion have a much better item to do against great champions. Sejuani, Zac, and Jarvan can now go a bit more off tank into more options. Even supports can now do it a lot more convincingly without feeling like they're wasting their gold. So overall, I do feel like this is a very, very good change. And I think this will take more effect into the meta than it seems like it will. Seeker's Armguard got a 5 armor increase. It's decent, but it still sucks. Sadly, the item doesn't give the value that it used to, and it kind of feels very lackluster now. So it will not feel much better to build it compared to before. And Static Shiv got the damage damage to minions decreased again. Sadly, I don't think we're going to see a lot of Static Shiv going into Worlds, but some people might still try and do it. I think Static Shiv lost its value like a good couple of patches ago, but people just like it too much because they feel, it's a funny item. It's like, push wave, go fast. But in all fairness, it's sadly not really doing anything. And I am very hopeful that come Worlds, the item will start fading very quickly. Another thing I want to note, accessibility update. You can now opt into visual notification for global sound effects in game. This is really nice. Especially in crowded fights, it's very natural that a lot of people don't listen, don't notice. The display showcased is really helpful. It's not really distracting, and it kind of helps a lot of players that maybe are, focused on other things to be more concerned about enemy abilities. I suggest everyone to turn this on, although I do understand that you don't feel like you need it. That's completely fine. I feel like it's always better to have it on than off. I don't think there's no downside of having this off. And I think it's a really, really good change, and I'm happy for it. Yeah, other than that, the skins are awesome. I love Qiyana's especially. And I'm kind of really excited to see what worlds will bring. I'm rooting for G2. I hope they go really far. I hope they even win it. I think Gen G has a really good shot at winning it again. I think T1 is sadly a bit lower class than they were before. I mean, maybe the off time from season ending will help them, but we'll see. I'm also really excited about the new format of Worlds. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. To finish things up, I want to discuss a bit of the tier list I've put up here. It's just more of a consistent idea of what is like suited in the best kind of roles. I still put Aatrox on S tier. I have Senna, Jarvan, Xayah, and Ezreal there because I think those are the more solid champions that we're going to see a fuck ton of. And I think they are incredibly strong both in solo queue and competitive right now, especially Senna. For Ezreal and Xayah being there is more of a meta situation. Right now, the meta is very devolved into dive comps. With Galio's changes, Camille being super powerful, Jarvan and Nocturne being very present. So having AD carries that have a very get out of jail free card is extremely valuable. I imagine that the now appropriate builds for most of these champions is a bit different. Now they usually go after the penetration item, mostly Lord Dominik's. They usually go into Black Cleaver and then Bork. The reasoning for this is very simple. Given the changes to and the meta and a lot of people building armor because it's such an AD focused meta, having much better penetration is a lot more important. And the idea and the reality that Black Cleaver gives you both movement speed and sustainability with the HP that it provides makes it a very good item for double penetration. So basically, if you're playing Xayah or Ezreal and you have those two items, there's basically nothing you can't shred. Like Malphite and Sejuani and Sion on the enemy team, they feel like butter. It's extremely powerful on them. And Bork at the end just to shred max HP and give some survivability with the lifesteal that it provides. You do have a bit less crit than you really usually have on these champions. They don't really function purely off crit, especially Xayah and Ezreal. So you'll be perfectly fine, and I think they're one of the strongest champions right now. In B tier, in A tier, we have Nocturne, which is doing really well in solo queue. I don't know if he's gonna do that well in competitive. but right now, at least in solo queue, he's doing amazingly well. Aurelia still doing fantastically well. I still feel like she's a lot better than people give her credit to, but they don't really build Serenity Force. So it becomes kind of awkward. So she feels a bit weaker than she actually is. I think she has a lot of room to be much stronger than she is showing. Briar is also a champion that I think amazing right now. She's still really strong, perfectly fitting for the meta of going in, with a lot of disruption into the backline, with a lot of sustain and great synergy with the strongest items in the game right now. I think she functions amazingly well both top and jungle, so easy A tier on both roles. For AD carries here, I placed, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure what AD carry I placed here, but I do know that what's it called? Support wise, what's it called? Zyra, Karma, and Jenna are doing pretty pretty well. They are very undervalued right now, because of how the meta is a bit in the bot lane. But actively in the game, if you can get past that first early stages, they are some of the best champions right now. Karma, especially in the early game, is doing amazing. Especially if she has Ezreal and Karma, that's where she gets the most kind of um, uh, output on, where she can make a lot of pressure and control a lot of game and get fast quicker. The recent buff they gave her still feel very nice with the new items, especially Moonstone and Echoes, which are the best support items by far. Like, not even like close. If you really need the movement speed, you can go Shirelia's, but in effectiveness, not worth it. In all honesty, Moonstone by far is the best, and Echoes is pretty okay. Zyra, because given the meta is really into dive comps, Zyra is a perfectly natural counter to dive comps, and she also functions pretty well as a poke comp in the bot lane. So it's an alternative to Karma if you feel like the enemy you can't pick. If they pick hard engage and you don't really want to go Karma because you don't feel safe in it, Zyra is a really good option. And Jenna is like the kind of mash between Zyra and Karma, where again, meta very into dive comps. Jenna just completely neutralizes dive comps very easily if she gets some level of protection. And with the level of AD carries that are now being focused, like Ezreal, Senna, and Xayah, it creates a lot of extra damage for them to use their newfound penetration in. Although Jenna and Xayah kind of feel awkward with each other a bit, it's not awkward enough to where it's not extremely powerful. Another, I was thinking of something, but I ended up forgetting. Well, either way, below we have LeBlanc and Lee Sin. So usually I put them here because I kind of, although I do believe they got better, and especially Lee Sin, I don't think he got much better. The reality is, like, you're just gonna flip games harder in the early game. You probably will win some more matchups than you were winning before, but you in reality are much weaker the more the game goes. So in solo queue, you might become A tier, maybe even higher given time, but in competitive, I don't think it will do anything. And even in solo queue, if you as a jungler can counter gank him, make time, have good momentum in the game, he's gonna still feel useless towards the game. Like, he's just an insect button and nothing else. And LeBlanc, although I do feel like her AP builds will be much stronger now, I also do believe that League of Legends players will take a fuck ton of time to get adjusted to it. So she might again be, A tier, like mid to low A tier, I do feel like people will drop her off the face of the earth more and more instead of switching to regular EP builds. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today. Really excited for Worlds. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I see you guys in the next one. If you liked it, give it a like and subscribe. Bye bye.